Welcome to video 143 from Sumit Academy. I do hope that you have subscribed to my channel. Do subscribe now so that you do not miss out on my previous or future videos. And do remember to like and share this video too. And if you want to drop in a line, I am always available at sumitacademy20@gmail.com. To make your task a little easier, here is a complete list of all the 143 videos on my YouTube channel. The list is divided into the playlists under which they are available. Do have a look. So far, in my earlier videos, we have studied the concept of disaster and disaster management. We have had a look at what causes earthquakes and floods, their mitigation strategies, and government policies regarding all these. We are now dealing with the perennial problem of this nation, a problem so slow moving, so predictable, yet so dangerous in its effects. A problem which is even now present in a large portion of our country, and that is the problem of droughts. This is also a water and climate related disaster. Being a very big subject, we shall study about drought in 3 separate videos. In my first video on drought, I had explained the concept of drought, its types, the drought situation in India, and the 9 major reasons for the occurrence of droughts in India. I had also explained the difference between El Nino and La Nina and their impact on the Indian monsoon. In this, my second video on drought, we shall talk about the consequences and economic impact of drought and the ways to cope with it, including the need of a drought preparedness and mitigation strategy. This second video will also discuss the traditional ways of water conservation in India. The next video, the third on drought, will discuss in detail about the National Disaster Management Guidelines for management of drought. But more about that later. Let us now study the consequences of drought. Drought can have serious health, social, economic, and political impacts with far reaching consequences. Water is one of the most essential commodities for human survival, second only to breathable air. So, when there is a drought, which by definition means having too little water to meet current demands, conditions can become difficult or dangerous very quickly. The first consequence is hunger and famine. Drought conditions often provide too little water to support food crops through either natural precipitation or irrigation using reserve water supplies. The same problem affects grass and grain used to feed livestock and poultry. When drought undermines or destroys food sources, people go hungry. When the drought is severe and continues over a long period, a famine may occur. The second consequence is thirst. All living things must have water to survive. People can live for weeks without food, but only a few days without water. When desperate for water to drink, people will turn to untreated sources that can make them sick. The third consequence is disease. Drought often creates a lack of clean water for drinking, public sanitation, and personal hygiene, which can lead to a wide range of life-threatening diseases. The problem of water access is critical. Every year, millions are sickened or die due to lack of clean water access and sanitation. And droughts only make the problem worse. The fourth consequence is wildfires. The low moisture and precipitation that often characterize droughts can quickly create hazardous conditions in forests and across rangelands, setting the stage for wildfires that may cause injuries or deaths, as well as extensive damage to property and already shrinking food supplies. In addition, even plants generally adapted to dry conditions will drop needles and leaves during a drought, contributing to a layer of dead vegetation on the ground. Now, this dry stuff then becomes a dangerous fuel for damaging wildfires. The fifth consequence is on wildlife. Wild plants and animals suffer from droughts, even if they have adapted to dry conditions. In grasslands, sustained lack of rain decreases forage production, affecting herbivores, grain-eating birds, and indirectly predators and scavengers. Droughts will lead to increased mortality and reduced reproduction, which is especially problematic for populations of at-risk species whose numbers are already very low. Wildlife needing wetlands for breeding, for example, ducks and geese, experience drought as there is a decline in available nesting sites. The sixth consequence is social conflict and war. When a precious commodity like water is in short supply due to drought, and the lack of water creates a corresponding lack of food, people will compete and eventually fight and kill to secure enough water to survive. Some believe that the current Syrian civil war ultimately started after 1.5 million rural Syrians fled the drought stricken rural areas for the cities, triggering unrest. Nearer home, there is brewing tension with Pakistan over the sharing of Indus waters and with Bangladesh over sharing the waters of the Teesta River. In fact, Bangladesh blames India for withholding more than its share of water and causing rising soil salinity levels and eventual desertification in parts of Bangladesh. The seventh consequence is on electricity generation. Many areas in the world rely on hydroelectric projects for electricity. Drought will reduce the amount of water stored in reservoirs behind dams, reducing the amount of power produced. This problem can be very challenging for the numerous small communities relying on small-scale hydro, where a small electric turbine is installed on a local creek. The eighth consequence is migration or relocation. Faced with the other impacts of drought, many people will flee a drought stricken area in search of a new home with a better supply of water, enough food, and without the disease and conflict that were present in the place they are leaving. Now, what is the economic impact of drought? Economic impacts often involve losing money either by individuals or families, businesses, and governments. Farmers will have to spend more money to irrigate the crops and provide water for livestock on animal farms and ranches. They have to spend money to drill new wells or buy water in tankers from faraway places. Low crop yield means farmers lose a lot of money. Farm workers have to take pay cuts and some may even have to be laid off. Businesses and industries that manufacture farm equipment and resources lose money because farmers do not have the money to buy from them. Less or no rains means drier conditions and more bush fires. Farms are destroyed, properties are razed down, forests and trees are burnt, and people lose money this way. Governments also need to spend more resources to fight fires and send emergency supplies to the most needed places. Businesses spend more on electric generators or may even close production if hydro energy companies operate below capacity. Energy industries also lose money because they cannot meet the energy demand of the region. The government again gets less tax money because people spend less. Businesses connected to water recreation, such as beaches, water parks, and lakeside activities, may close down because of low water levels or dried out water bodies. The livelihoods of people connected to such businesses are all affected. The environmental impact of droughts means that plants, animals, climate, soil, rocks, and many others are all affected by drought conditions. Some biotic and abiotic factors recover when the droughts are over. Others never recover again. Soil moisture is key for the breakdown of organic matter. Droughts lower the quality of soils, and because there is less organic activity and more wind erosion, soil insects or organisms perish. Water bodies like lakes, creeks, ponds, lagoons, and lakes dry out, and water animals die. This is called habitat destruction. When aquatic animals and other wildlife die, entire food chains and ecosystems are also affected. Desertification. This is when fertile lands, vegetable lands, that is, vegetation lands, become bare and infertile, often as a result of overgrazing, deforestation, and other economic activity. Droughts make this process even worse and eliminate any chances of the land recovering. The health and quality of freshwater biomes, such as lakes and ponds, rivers and streams, and wetlands, are affected, and living organisms in there are also endangered. Animals, that is the wildlife, migrate long distances in search of water. They end up in new habitats, making them vulnerable and endangered, whilst others face new threats. The social implication of droughts is perhaps the most felt, as they directly involve us and our families. Some people, especially those from developed countries, have never experienced what it is to live without adequate water. It is a nightmare. Health has a direct link to the water supply of any settlement. Clean water for drinking and water for cleaning and sanitation help society prevent and manage diseases. Hunger, malnutrition, anemia, and mortality impacts of drought are indirect in nature. Droughts cause low food production, crops and livestock, and particularly in poorer regions, people have less to eat. Food nutrition is also a problem, and that leads to vulnerability, diseases, illness, and deaths. This is particularly so in remote communities of poorer countries where communication and accessibility is usually poor. Fresh water levels and water discharge during droughts are low, resulting in less dilution in ecosystem waters. This means that the concentration of chemicals, nutrients, and solid particles increases and dissolved oxygen decreases. People migrate to other places in search of better living conditions. Now, this makes a region in drought vulnerable, as many of its young and working population are forced to leave. Farm families suffer more when family members migrate. There is more pressure on women to work outside the farms to help provide for the family. Anxiety, stress, and the generally low and drained feeling of not knowing when things will improve can have a negative impact on people. People are unhappy and depressed because all the things that they are used to doing is no longer available, and they have to deal with a difficulty that has no end in sight. Community networks are broken and social interaction decreases. This results in low self esteem and feeling of social isolation. So, how do we cope with drought? Drought is hard to detect and cannot be prevented. It is different from other natural hazards such as earthquakes, hurricanes, and floods. The impact of drought can be mitigated through careful planning and management process before or at the onset of drought. Now, being a slow onset disaster, drought gives us ample time for preparedness, response, and mitigation, unlike sudden disasters like earthquakes. The components of a drought preparedness and mitigation plan are prediction, monitoring, impact assessment, and response. Prediction can benefit from climate survey of snowpacks, anomalous circulation patterns in the ocean and atmosphere, soil moisture, assimilation of remotely sensed data into numerical prediction models, and knowledge of stored water available for domestic, stock, and irrigation uses. Monitoring exists in countries which use ground based information such as rainfall, weather, crop conditions, and water availability. Satellite observations complement data collected by ground systems. Now, satellites are necessary for the provision of synoptic, wide area coverage. Impact assessment is carried out on the basis of land use type, persistence of stressed conditions, demographics and existing infrastructure, intensity and areal extent, and its effect on agricultural yield, public health, water quantity and quality, and building subsidence. Response includes improved drought monitoring, better water and crop management, augmentation of water supplies with groundwater, increased public awareness and education, intensified watershed and local planning, reduction in water demand, and water conservation. Planned efforts can be made to conserve natural sources of water and to prevent misuse and overexploitation. This can be done through watershed development and rainwater harvesting. Watershed is a natural unit drained by a river and its tributaries. It is managed by allowing water to flow naturally to a common point where it is collected to allow seepage into subsoil surface and recharge groundwater. A watershed is like a bathtub. The watershed outlet, the mouth of a pond, lake, or river, is the tub's drain. The watershed boundary is the tub's rim. The watershed's drainage system consists of a network of rivers, streams, constructed channels, storm drains, wetlands, and the underlying groundwater. Rainwater harvesting is a technique for recharging groundwater by collecting rainwater as it falls over roofs of houses or on the ground to a common point. It is then stored in groundwater reservoirs which are artificially built for this purpose. Let us now have a look at the traditional water conservation methods in India. Historically, conservation of water has been a traditional practice in India. The knowledge of hydrology is deep rooted in the science of ancient India. Our ancestors applied the knowledge in water resource engineering. They designed and constructed dams and a variety of water structures much earlier than the consciously believed Greek, Roman, or other ancient civilizations. Every region of a country had its own water harvesting techniques, reflecting the geographical peculiarities and cultural uniqueness of different communities. Water conservation is a key element of any strategy that aims to alleviate the water scarcity crisis in India. With rainfall patterns changing almost every year, the Indian government has started looking at means to revive the traditional systems of water harvesting in the country. Given that these methods are simple and eco-friendly for the most part, they are not just highly effective for the people who rely on them, but they are also good for the environment. In the western and central Himalayas, diversion channels guhis were built to draw water from hill streams or springs. The length of these channels varied from 1 to 15 kilometers and carried a discharge of 15 to 100 liters per second. In Meghalaya, bamboo pipes are used to tap spring water for irrigation, which finally reduces to 20 to 80 drops per minute at the site, functioning as a drip irrigation system. Farmers of Khasi and Jaintia tribes have successfully used this unique technique, to irrigate fields of black pepper, betel, etc. It has been replicated in urban areas too, where water stored on rooftop tanks is allowed to flow through bamboo channels to irrigate fields and back gardens. The Charpine system of irrigation is prevalent in South Bihar. Ahars are rectangular catchment basins and pines are channels built to utilize the water flowing from the seasonal streams. Kunds in the Thar desert are covered underground tanks with an artificially prepared catchment area. The structure is shaped like the ball with a lid. In the Malabar area, a surangam is a tunnel dug through a laterite hillock from which water seeps out and is collected. Katta is a temporary structure made by binding mud and loose stones available locally. Built across small streams and rivers, this stone bund slows the flow of water and stores a large amount, depending upon its height during the dry months. The collected water gradually seeps into ground and increases the water level of nearby wells. In coastal areas, they also minimize the flow of fresh water into the sea. Water soak pits, called as madakas in Karnataka, Pemghada in Odisha, and Johards in Rajasthan, are one of the oldest systems used to conserve and recharge groundwater. Constructed on an area with naturally high elevation on three sides, soil is excavated to create a storage area and used to create a wall on the fourth side to hold water. Johads collect monsoon water, which slowly seeps in to recharge groundwater and maintain soil moisture. Sometimes, many johads are interconnected with a gully or deep channels with a single outlet in a water or stream nearby to prevent structural damage. This cost-efficient and simple structure requires annual maintenance of desilting and cleaning the storage area of weed growth. Water from johads is still widely used by farmers to irrigate fields in many parts of India. In fact, the arid state of Rajasthan has seen a drastic improvement in water conservation due to the revival of johads. What needs to be done today is revival of old johads, many of which have fallen into disrepair due to growth of weed plants and dumping of waste. We will now take a look at some long-term drought mitigation strategies. Any steps taken to mitigate or prepare for drought have to be sustained for a long period of time and must involve a cross-section of people such as community, panchayat, non-governmental organizations, and government representatives. Some of the steps required are: first, construction of community-based rainwater harvesting structures. Second, promoting watershed programs. Third, increasing forest cover through plantations. Fourth, adopting drought-resistant varieties of paddy and other crops. And fifth, using alternative crops for drought conditions. Other steps required are introducing livelihood options besides agriculture and animal husbandry, which are water intensive, and finally, seventh, encouraging crop and seed insurance schemes. Well, that's all from me in this, our second video on drought. Our third video on drought will talk about the National Disaster Management Guidelines for Management of Drought. Do have a look at all three videos on drought to understand the subject properly. This video is based on the information freely available on the internet. No originality is claimed for the same. The intention of this video is only to prepare candidates for answering examination questions on the subject and not for any financial gains. Do like and share this video and do subscribe to my channel now so that you do not miss out on my previous or future videos. Till later then, cheerio.